Okay.
Great. Right, thank you. I think we're all ready. We're going to begin. Good evening. Welcome to members, officers, the press and public joining the Strategic Development Committee. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube when we're complete. So welcome to anybody who's viewing us after the fact. Most officers are viewing this evening's meeting via Zoom. Can I check those in the room can all hear me?
Yes.
And those online, are you able to hear me? My name is Councillor Rachel Tripp. I'm the chair of the Strategic Development Committee. I'll be chairing the meeting this evening. As always, members in the room, when you're speaking, can you please speak clearly and loudly so that the microphone can pick up what you say? And for those joining via Zoom, please mute your microphone if you're not speaking. I'm now going to ask first members of the committee and then officers to introduce themselves.
Councillor Carlin Lee Parkway, Glasgow South.
Councillor Masters, Sam South.
Councillor Madeline Sally, Plunston Forest Gate South.
And Councillor Colin McLean from West Ham.
Thank you. Can I suggest that officers introduce themselves in the order they appear on the agenda?
I'm Jane Custance. I'm the Director of Planning and Development.
Hi, I'm James Bolt, Senior Development Manager.
Hi, I'm Chloe Toll, planner at the Majors team.
Liam McFadden, Principal Planner on the Majors team.
Vincent Healy, Legal Advisor.
And I think that we're also joined by Toby Young. Is that Toby Johnson? Is that right?
Yep, I'm Toby Johnson. I'm chairman of the Design Review Panel.
Great, thank you very much. Just want to remind members, as ever, when a vote is taken, it will be by way of raising our physical hand so that we can capture that on the screen. Item number 1 is apologies. What apologies do we have, please, Shirley?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from absence of legal Beckles, Morris, and Singh Purdy. That's it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Item number 2, any declarations of interest?
No, Chair.
No, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3, determining planning applications. Members are asked to note the advice from the Head of Legal Services. Is that noted?
Noted.
Thank you. Announcements from the Chair. We've had the following requests to address the committee. Could the speakers please identify themselves when I call out the name? Item number 5, that's 1 to 11 Broadway. Daniel White.
Daniel White, Senior Planner, Park Planning.
Thank you. And item 6, 300 Manor Road. William Jones. Fine. William, I think you've joined us online. If you're speaking, you
sorry, I beg your pardon. Yes, you have. Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think you're joined also by your colleagues here in the room, here to answer questions needed. Thank you. The usual practice is to allow up to 5 minutes in total for both supporters and objectors. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest that we reverse the order of business. Simply because Toby, the chair of our design review panel, can only be with us for the first hour, and it's the second item that has been through the design review panel process. So can I ask that we agree to take those items and not in the order in which they appear on the agenda?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So please note the full consideration and planning assessment of matters is covered comprehensively in our committee report. I know members will have had full regard to the committee report, so the officer presentations will be a summary of the key issues only. So with that, can I please call upon the applicants team for item 6, Manor Road, to address the committee if they wish.
Thank you, Chair. The intention was to be available to answer any questions you have rather than do a specific presentation, but unless colleagues in the room want to add to that.
No, we're very happy for you to be here for any questions that we have. Thank you. In which case, could I move on to the officer report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just bear with me while I share my screen. I think I need permissions to share my screen if someone could.
Apologies, Liam.
That's all right.
Set that up for you. 1 moment.
No problem.
Have it now.
Okay, can I just check that's sharing properly and you can all hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So item 6 today is the Manor Road Phase 2 development. So the application site is located in the west of the borough, just to the north of Canning Town Station. The site history, so it benefits from a hybrid application. So to very briefly explain what a hybrid application is, this is a combination of full permissions. That would be like a normal planning application with all the details you'd normally expect, and an outline component. So this is a less detailed part of the application, which the application today is there to approve the details of that. Phase 1 is detailed, and the outline components are phase 2 and 3. The application today is phase 2. There are conditions and obligations secured as part of the parent permission, and they apply to the whole site and are discharged at each phase of development. So to give some context, the part in yellow on your screen there is the application today, that's phase 2. The buildings in white, that's phase 1. Construction has begun on that. And the pinkish color on the right is phase 3. So today's application is the reserves matters application to approve details of scale, appearance, layout, access, landscaping of the outline permission in relation to phase 2. Phase 2 consists of 290 residential units, 1,040 square meters of commercial space, and 4,420 square meters of soft and hard landscaping, including play space, communal gardens, and the completion of the linear park. The development will be laid out across 4 blocks ranging from 8 to 13 stories. So some key visuals here. This is the layout of the site. So the blocks on the right are just labeled for you. So D, E, F, G, just to give you an idea of this element of phase 2. This visual is a 3D representation of the site, just to show the context of phase 1 on the right and phase 2. And on the bottom of the screen, you'll see the linear park, which joins onto phase 1. And here are some further visuals. This is from the southwest looking up site. This is from the north. And this is an example of the ground floor. So to give you some idea of the entrances and detailing at that level. So the key application considerations on this one are the compliance with the outline permission, the design and the appearance, the quality of the accommodation, and transport and travel. So to begin with, compliance with the outline permission, quantum of development. So this is the size and amount of commercial and residential space, and this is consistent with the parent permission. Similarly, housing, so the mix is broadly in accordance. There is a slight discrepancy, so there are some fewer 3-beds in the market and intermediate tenures. However, there are additional 3-bed units at London affordable rent. There's a slight under provision of market 1 beds and an over provision of market 2 beds. However, the intention of outline permissions is to offer some flexibility. So overall, the housing mix is broadly in accordance with that. So there are no objections in planning terms. The amount of affordable housing on this application is 50% of a 62-38 split for intermediate and London affordable rent, and that is compliant with what was approved at outline stage. In terms of energy savings, the carbon saving is 72%, which is a betterment over the 64% approved at outline stage, and the non-residential meets the excellent BREEAM standard as required. So the overall conclusion is that the application is in compliance with the outline permission. Moving on to design and appearance. So the overall massing, height, and layout are all established by the parameter plans, which were approved as part of the outline permission. All the development remains within those parameters, so it remains acceptable in that regard. The application has been to 2 design review panels. The applicants have worked with us to amend the scheme to address some of the concerns raised at those panels. So that would include the spacing between blocks F and G, some of the materiality, and the prominence of the entrances at ground level. Overall, we consider the design standards to be of good quality. The landscaping especially is to be considered a high standard and beneficial to the scheme. So to conclude, we support the design and appearance of the scheme. Moving on to quality of accommodation. All of the units comply with the minimum space standards. They all have private amenity space in accordance with guidance, and they've all been backed up by a daylight and sunlight report to show that they receive good levels of daylight and sunlight. There were concerns raised by officers about the large proportion of single aspect units. However, we do acknowledge that most family units have been designed to be dual aspect. those single aspect units mostly face onto amenity space and are designed to have relatively shallow living areas, which helps mitigate the negative aspects of single aspect units. In the overall planning balance, we do note that single aspect units are negative, but we do consider the benefits of the scheme as a whole outweigh these negatives. So in conclusion, on balance, the quality of accommodation is acceptable. Moving on to transport and travel. General layout of roads and vehicular entrances was established in the outline permission, and it remains in accordance with that. The outline permission was subject to a number of conditions around parking, cycle parking, car park management, things like that. Those conditions all apply to this phase of development. It has been reviewed by our own transport officers who raised no objections to the scheme. We do note an objection on file from TfL regarding the number and the size of the cycle parking spaces. The applicant has provided a response to this, which is in the report itself. We do note that there are conditions on the outline permission which require details of cycle parking and oversized cycle parking to be submitted and approved at a later date. On that basis, we don't consider this would be a reason for refusal, as these issues can be addressed during the approval of those details. So on balance, the transport and travel impacts are acceptable. That brings us to our conclusion. The Strategic Development Committee is asked to resolve to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the report and delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant permission subject to the conditions listed in Appendix 1 of the committee report. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'll just give you a moment to stop sharing your screen.
Sure.
Members, can I ask if any of you have questions or comments, either for the applicants or for the officer? Councillor Masters, I see you, then Councillor Simonton, then Councillor McLean.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I wasn't a member of the committee for some of the early stages, so apologies if I'm covering ground that's been covered in previous meetings. I know on page 134.170, it says that overall, the proposal is considered to have demonstrated a satisfactory level of fire safety. Is that just a form of words? Because that sounds a little bit mealy-mouthed, and I'm just wondering how safe this development is.
Thanks, Councillor. So this application, the outline permission was actually granted before the requirement to submit a fire statement. You'll know that current applications, we have to refer to the Health and Safety Executive to assess. Having said that, the applicants have provided some details on fire safety, which we have looked at and considered to be, what we'd expect to see, we'll put it that way. Hasn't been to the same level of rigorous testing as current applications are, but that's because policy has moved on since the original application was granted.
If I could just add to that, all the blocks do include 2 staircases, which is the emerging guidance in respect of tall buildings. So that's already included within the design of the scheme.
That's helpful, thank you. Susan, did you want to come back at all?
Yes, I just wanted to check. So does that mean that actually the scheme in its present spec will meet the new standards?
Yes, that is correct. Yes, that it's already built into the scheme in the design.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Simonton.
I wanted to thank both the developers and our planning teams for the work that they've put into redesigning aspects of this application so that it meets the points that were raised in previous meetings. So thank you very much for that. We are, as always, very pleased to see housing available within the borough, particularly at a high rate of social housing. So thank you for that. As one of the to me and to many of my residents, the #1 issue that we have in the borough is poor housing particularly of 2 and 3 bedroom flats or accommodation. So thank you very much for that. Unfortunately, more people needing more places to live means higher properties. And we do understand that some of the local residents are concerned about the height of the building, but it falls within the planning designation for the area that was published not only in the local plan, I believe, but also in the manifesto. It's also follows the manifesto pledge to put in place more housing for local residents. So thank you.
Did you have any questions or?
No, just comments at the moment.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor McLean.
Brilliant, thank you. Excuse the croaky voice. I noticed that there was a number of objections from residents, and I think that, you know, people, they've taken the time to object, so we should sort of delve a little bit deep into some of the things that they've raised. So obviously the right to review is not a right planning matter, but they have mentioned about construction noise, dirt and dust, and also about parking. So I know obviously it's a car-free development, and you know that's usually residents are made aware of that when they purchase their buildings. But I know that the RPZ in that area is a shorter one. So I'm just slightly concerned that, you know, although it is advertised as car-free, people have cars and then may potentially park on residential streets. So I don't know if there's anything we can do about that, maybe when they're marked is probably not planning matter. But I just wanted to raise that because it is something that concerns residents.
Would making new residents of the potential development aware that it's car-free be part of a commitment from you as the applicants?
It is already in terms of, so we're currently marketing phase 1 and it's made absolutely clear to residents. I would have to defer to Gwilym in terms of the other measures we took at outline stage, but I don't think there is the ability for residents here to get a resident permit either. I think that was controlled at section 106 stage, and we've also made there's an obligation towards a car club as well. But just to answer the main question, it's made absolutely clear at point of marketing for the private sale homes and indeed to the RPs that we'd work with in terms of the affordable housing that it is a car-free scheme. And I think the necessary sort of more, I'd say, sort of legal measures that you can't park are in place through the 106 as well.
And I think importantly, feedback from customers or potential customers they're not suggesting that they want car parking spaces. So it's not that they're put off by the fact that there's limited parking. And of course, as Duncan mentions, there's membership of the car club.
The point about the hours of restriction of the local RPZ is a really good one, although not one that we can resolve here as part of this subsidiary permission. I wonder whether perhaps we could make a note. Liam, would you be able to take that away as an action point to discuss with Lorinda, our transport advisor, who I think is here today, and also to pick that up with highways as being a concern, because I think it is, like I say, it's a policy concern rather than a specific one, which is where the hours of restriction are very short. That can undermine the intention of a car-free development, and it would just be worth flagging to colleagues in highways. Thank you. I wonder, while we do have you on the call, could I perhaps bring in the chair of DRP, Toby Johnson, to tell us a bit about the evolution of this application, and particularly about any of the issues that were raised by DRP, which is still outstanding?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think we had 2 reviews and a chair's review of the scheme. The applicant responded well to the comments that we made. I think we had initially concerns about the area to the north of the site and the play area and the relationship back to the scheme, I think, and also the sort of parking in that area. All of those we feel were addressed positively. We raised some concerns about the long block facing, I think it's F and G, is it, or E and F? And I think the applicant did split the block at the higher level to sort of break down what otherwise was a very long and imposing block. And that has certainly improved the streetscape. In our last review, we were making more detailed comments about the sort of architectural character and materiality of those buildings and seeking more modelling between the two taller buildings and the link block to try and sort of break down that massing even further and trying to get more modelling into the sort of architecture. We were also trying to get a clearer hierarchy in entrances so that the communal entrances to the residential had a greater prominence and a greater visibility, and were clearly distinct from the commercial entrances. And I think the applicant was going to take those comments away. So I think we're very comfortable with the direction of travel. We hope that the final comments were picked up. I think, you know, the thing that is strongest about this scheme is the sort of linear park, which has a very good aspect and provides, you know, very good amenity space for the residents, which I think, you know, where you've got higher densities is critical, and often the sort of the quantum and quality of that space falls below what we feel is acceptable. But in this case, we think that's one of the sort of strengths of the scheme. So I think those were our main issues, and obviously we hope that our final comments get sort of captured either in the application or in conditions.
Thank you for that. That's really helpful. I always reiterate at planning meetings how very seriously we take the work of the design review panel and how much we value their input and how much attention we give to their comments. So it's always good to hear when applications have progressed in line with what they've said. I did just, if I could ask you to wait for just one moment, I did just want to pick up one comment that I did notice from the DRP, which was commenting that the non-residential units on the ground floor and their early occupation is going to be quite important to the success of the scheme. I wondered whether that was something that you've been able to address already, whether you had any tenants in mind or were in discussions with anyone.
Not as yet, and indeed we're going to be starting the marketing of the phase 1 retail soon. I mean, look at the timescale when this is going to be delivered. Probably two or 3 years out from at least 2 years out from occupation. So it would be too early to be marketing at this stage. But what we'll definitely do is take the lead from phase 1. I think I explained at the DCMF meeting that we had that we've definitely taken some lessons learned from Rathbone Market, where I accept that we didn't get it right. We made it more divisible. We've looked at more flexible spaces to introduce workspace into there as well. So I certainly feel that we're a developer that will take lessons learned and bring those to bear.
That's good to hear.
If I could just add, in terms of the, there is actually a condition on the original planning permission which requires a commercial marketing strategy to be submitted and approved by the council. So there's a mechanism in place to cover that as well.
That's helpful, thank you. And obviously it's good to have your verbal commitment to that too. Councillor Lee Parkway, and then I'll come back to you, Mads.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite pleased to hear you talk about lessons learned from previous projects and the importance of not allowing that space to be redundant for the greater good of the whole community in which that will exist there. I do have a couple of things I want to I don't know if they're questions, but maybe you might be able to elaborate. So I noted in the DRP documents around the linear park, and it spoke about a full-time gardener, which I thought actually was really good in regards to seeing the application here today. You're forward thinking, you're not thinking about it later and oops days if you haven't got enough money. You're actually forward thinking. And one of the things about projects is that it looks great on the and I love a computer generated image, but in reality, does it really look like that? And just the fact that you've kind of thought that in and it's part of the process is really good. I do want to understand, and I think we spoke about this quite a lot in the previous application, how this, and I do note some of the points on the DRP's report in regards to what that linear park would look like and how it would feel for residents. And I remember in previous applications, we talked about obviously be an asset for that community, but also be an asset for people walking or cycling around that area, and what that would feel like for them, and how it becomes part of Newham and not just a nice little bit of space in the middle of nowhere. And I just wondered, have you had any more consideration, more thoughts in regards to how that's accessible for children with special education needs and disabilities, and that those of adults that might require sensory input, and those things that matter in that space? And then there was one other thing. I do want to understand, and apologise. I do want to understand why so many properties with single, can't remember what the words are.
Single aspect?
That's the one. Why so many? I think I read in here 153 units, single aspect, and I just wondered what that would feel like for the residents in that space. So if you wouldn't mind unpacking that slightly. Obviously, we did hear a bit from the officer, but if you could just maybe elaborate so we can understand what that would feel like for a family within that space, or a couple, or a single person.
I start on the park first.
You can do whatever you like first.
So the park is a key asset, I think, for Newham in terms of the linkage between the Lower Lee Valley and, you know, all the way up to Stratford from the Limo Peninsula and up. So, and we're working with Newham and in terms of how it will look and how it will feel, but we're delivering a lot of, or we're committing to deliver a lot of play space for young people and all the way through to adult play and teenagers, and so we're capturing everyone. We're not just doing, you know, play spaces for individual groups. We've got a running track, we've got a cycle track, a skate park, so it will encompass a lot of activities to target a wide breadth of the local community. And yeah, we want to make sure that it's not just a space that's sat there by the side of the railway line. It's going to be a key integral part for Newham and its green space strategy. In terms of the gardener commitment, so we've got an estate management company that will be setting up to manage the actual the external amenity and hard and soft landscaping, including the linear park and the cycleways. And yeah, that will be a commitment that we'll deliver as part of phase 1 and phase 2 when it comes to the occupation of both all of the blocks, both phases. So yeah, it is key, and it's key we get it right, and we need to make sure, and we want to commit to making sure that this is a well-used space for everyone.
Also, we're really into the detail on phase 1, and obviously this is a two-part part. You know what I mean? So, you know, we'll be able to see what's working with phase 1. We're really into the detail now, and so similar to what I said about retail lessons and bring those into phase 2. There was definitely discussion at DRP about differences and different sort of sensory perception bases, and again, that will be something that we'll pick up in the detail. So to go with what Elizabeth said, I'm really confident that we're sort of catering to quite a broad mix of uses here, but we're really into the detail on phase 1, and we'll be happy to have a chat with you, if you wanted to sort of learn about how we're delivering that with phase 1.
Thank you.
I think it would just be important for you to take away our concern as a committee that the park is accessible, not only in terms of different age ranges and play, which is vital, but also in terms of the experiences of adults and children with special education needs.
Yeah.
And I think one of the key things that came out of the DRP was making sure that whilst there was lots of play, and that's great, but there was also lots of set down spaces for people to relax, because whilst every home on phases 1 and 2 have a balcony, which is great, private amenity space, people also want to have set down space outside of their home, and and places to relax in the sunshine, hopefully.
I think that's probably quite a nice segue into the single aspect element, which, you know, we've worked to minimise that. What we've got is obviously an original outline consent, which it is a long, thin site, which does make for, you know, probably a higher preponderance of single aspect units than we would like. Now, there are tricks that one can try and play to sort of artificially create dual aspect, but we've discussed that actually with officers, that we didn't think that putting indents into buildings to artificially create, you know, if you're facing one way, you're generally going to be facing that way. But as was pointed out by Liam, that the designs of the homes and predominantly the family homes have got the dual aspect. So it is the smaller homes that are the single aspect. They do have shallow living rooms. We don't have inset balconies, so you've got hung balconies, so you will get light into those. And as was pointed out by Liam, the vast majority of them are overlooking the amenity space. As Elizabeth said, we also encourage people to go and use that amenity space as well. So whilst that percentage, we've worked as hard as we can, I think it is by nature of a linear site that you are going to have more single aspect homes. You will have seen the daylight and sunlight studies put up by officers that we tick all of the boxes there in that regard. So I think there should be some comfort from that particular piece.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Got a couple of questions, but just picking up on that, if I may. As you know, one of the things that concerns all of us with regards to single aspect residences is through draft, isn't it? Is there any openable windows or vents in the common corridors and stairways?
I would need to check in terms of the common spaces, in terms with the concern being around overheating.
Yeah.
Concern being overheating. I know at the moment we're not overheated.
Yeah.
That's due to the jet stream, not much else at the moment.
So all of the homes will be built to the latest building standards, and that has clear, strict measures on overheating. So that's really strict and clear in terms of what comfort cooling and other measures we need to MEP systems we have to include in all of the homes. In terms of openable windows in the communal areas, I'm not sure. We'd have to check on that unless Gwilym, you're able to answer.
There aren't open windows within the communal areas, but as Elizabeth has said, the flats that will have openable windows, and they will also have some cooling for kind of extreme temperature conditions. So that's how that's being addressed.
So there's been an upgrade to the building reg standards between phases 1 and 2. So we have actually taken that into account. Okay. It was raised at DCMA.
The building that's recently received a design award and is absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
Not boiling.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my other questions, if I may, I have a concern because as those of us that know this site well know that Manor Road is quite a narrow road, and yet it is one of the major arteries north and south in the borough. It has a propensity, especially at the moment, to have temporary lights on it. As we know, there are around the station at the moment, which causes huge amounts of backlog of traffic and traffic delay in the area. I just wanted to check that the unloading and loading bays for the shops are not going to be blocking the road, and that there's not going to be there's going to be enough space for the larger trucks that may need to come in, for example, a supermarket place there, to actually be able to go into a space which isn't blocking the road, unload, and then remove itself from the space without blocking the road.
Yeah, we do have a lay-by that is introduced as part of the project into the road, and whilst it's quite tight where we are at the moment because of all the construction activity and the hoarding that's up, and I appreciate it's not going to open up the roadway. It will feel a lot wider once the hoarding comes down, and we've got a dedicated cycleway and footway on the left hand as you're looking up Manor Road on the left hand side. So it'll feel wider, but appreciate the traffic. We will have a dedicated loading bay, and also it was a feedback from the DRP was making clear wayfinding signage inside the site so that as deliveries, smaller trucks, not larger vans that you're talking about, but smaller like Amazon vans as an example, that we do have clear wayfinding for these delivery drives to find and set down spaces for them to drop.
And how are you going to stop? Yes. How are you going to stop residents or people popping to the shops parking in those spaces?
It will be a managed space. So there's clear estate management regime that will be adopted for those spaces, and they're only blue badge spaces, visitor bays or car club bays inside the development. So that will be managed by the management company.
I think it's a valid question. It's something we have to work hard at in all of our schemes. Well, no, because
That votes like.
and I think in terms of the sorry, I didn't mean to sort of comment like that. In terms of other schemes, we have to work very hard as sort of the managers of these schemes to make sure that people don't sort of abuse those systems. Yeah, we've again learned from Rathbone Market in that regard, where we introduced sort of a parking regime there. Elizabeth's absolutely right. What we did do early on as part of the overall application is that there's a suite of Section 278 works and highway improvements actually included within our demise. So that's part of the betterment. So everything that we've said is within our red line. So we're doing quite a lot of work there in terms of the cycle path, etc.
Okay, with regards to the park, as we know, one of the reasons it's there is there's a buffer for noise from the railway line for the residents, which is why it's on that side of the site and not on the other side, linking in with Manor Park. What is actually being put in place to act as the sound barrier?
In terms of that, so sorry. Willem, go on.
I was going to say, in terms of the location of the park, that's actually largely driven by the existing power lines, which require a setback from the building setback from that. So that creates the space. So we've made positive use of that space by putting in the park. So rather than it being a noise barrier, but the properties will be with the windows, there will be acoustic mitigation already built into the scheme. To deal with any noise from whether it's the Manor Road on one side or the railway on the other.
What about park users who will be very close to the railway lines?
Or if you've got your window open?
Yeah.
So there is a landscaping buffer along the railway line. Obviously, we are restricted by what we can do under the pylon and also adjacent to the TfL track side area. We are quite restricted, but there is a landscaped buffer along the side of the railway line, dividing between. So in terms of land, it will be it's quite well. It's trees and. I don't know the exact name, sorry, but it'll be trees and general soft landscaping in terms of hedgerows and others, but it's like a well landscaped area that we're introducing.
That falls under the maintenance of the gardener, which is paid through the service.
Yeah, exactly.
Helpful, thank you. There were a couple of things that I wanted to add as well. Firstly, a couple of things to really welcome about the application, I think. My colleague has already spoken about how important affordable homes are to the borough. Would we like more at London affordable rent? Of course we would, but it is so nice to see an application hitting the overall 50%, and that is really, really welcome. In terms of energy as well, I noticed that you're shipping BREEAM excellent and also exceeding the carbon saving. Again, it's just really welcome in terms of our responsibility of the borough in meeting the climate emergency and in terms of the life of our residents too. That said, so one thing I did want to ask about was about the provision of cycle parking. I noticed you're not quite up to the London plan requirement, which we normally kind of regard as like a starting off point rather than a landing point. So that's quite disappointing. And I was also a bit surprised to see on page 132 that you'd be analysing the need for oversized cycle parking space and then installing it as need arose. And you probably already know as a committee, like we all know, that's not really how cycle infrastructure works. It's actually that you build it and then people start to think, oh, actually, I could perhaps use an adaptive cycle as my mobility aid if I'm a disabled person, for example, because I can see the parking, I can see you. I could perhaps use a cargo bike, my family, because I can see where the bike would go and I can start thinking about that investment because I know it would be secure. So I did just want to hear a bit from you on that.
In terms of the original planning permission, which the council granted back in 2020, that included cycle provision, which was slightly below the standard. So that was when the GLA stage 2 report was considered, that was signed off by the GLA as well. And we are looking to try and balance the amount of cycle provision with active frontages, commercial space, and that's where we've ended up with in terms of the provision. And because of we are slightly below the standard, there was a condition imposed by the council requiring us to review the demand for cycle provision once shortly after occupation, and to provide additional cycle parking, including for oversized cycles, if there was demand for that at that point in time. So the council acknowledged and approved the provision back in, say, 2020, and with GLA approval, included that condition relating to oversized cycle parking. So that was actually the council imposing that on the scheme rather than us using it as a mechanism to kind of avoid riding it at 100%.
I'm sure we wouldn't want you to feel constrained by that. I'm sure that's the kind of condition where if you'd come back and said, oh, actually, we'd quite like to exceed that, I don't think anybody would have stood in your way.
I think we've been through the design review panel process, and one of the main things that we were sort of discussing with Toby and his team is that the building is having to work really, really hard to accommodate quite a lot. 50% affordable housing. We introduced the second staircases within the confines of an outline consent that was originally built around single staircases. We've been asked, and quite rightly so, and we're committing to more active frontages. So all of those pieces, I would say that yes, we would love to come back and say that, but the building really is trying to work very hard to achieve what we as developer feel on balance are more important issues for the schemes. But that would be my response to that.
I have to say thank you so much for that, and for, as you say, all the things you put in, like 2 staircases, so there's enough fire escape, so people are less likely to die in the event of fire. That's great. But I think we'd prefer it if you actually in advance put in the capacity or over capacity, particularly for larger bikes or for disabled bikes, because you're going to have to identify the areas anyway, should there be demand. So it's actually going to be cheaper for the management of the site to actually sort it out now. As we know, a lot has changed since 2020. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? As I said, yet again, mentioning the current heat in the rest of the world, who knows what new environmental impact measures we're going to have to put in place. So I think it's a good idea if this could actually be placed into the development now.
And would that, can I ask, I mean, is that clearly there's a capacity issue here to accommodate everything that we're looking to accommodate. So is the question that accommodating more oversized spaces and potentially then you reduce slightly the overall number, is that?
I'd rather there were more spaces,
yeah,
that it at least met at least the target.
Right.
As we know, by oversized bikes, if needed, can, you know, don't necessarily take up the space of 2 bikes. But the point is that at the moment we're under number. I know it's by a small amount, but as I said, things have changed a lot since 2020. And I think it's something that, as you're going to have to identify possible places for this to be put in, should there be demands, that let's just in the building demands, as Chair said, because that's more likely to reach others rather than saying an overgrown area. As we know, you can get double-decker bike parking, and it's not necessarily a lot more expensive than actually having to deal with parking furniture that's actually installed into the concreteless structure of the flooring, etc. I've got one final thing I wanted to ask concerning the building noise that local residents are concerned about. Can you just confirm here and now that the builders will be relying on all legislation to make sure that they only build within the agreed periods that legally they're allowed to?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's really good to hear, thank you. And hopefully residents will then be able to benefit from the long-term benefits of the park and the building acting as a noise buffer to the railway, as well as the benefit.
It's worth also noting phase 1, our contractors achieved 450 out of 50 scores on considerate constructors, which is an unheard of thing. really. So, I mean,
Inspectors or?
yeah, from an independent inspection body. So it's worth putting that on the record. And we have very good relationships with the local councillors, ward councillors who come and visit us. They're actually coming on Tuesday, and they come and visit us. The development, us ECF is the development company, and Morgan Sindall our contractor, and we have very good relations in terms of how we're working with them and communicating our messaging to the local community.
Do you give any communications to the local area to residents? So
Yes, we do, and we have QR codes up on the hoarding, and they'll be replaced by marketing hoarding soon. But we have QR codes, and we have newsletter drops, and yeah, we're sending out messages as regularly as we can.
so it's for them as well.
Sorry.
So it's for them as well.
Well, I mean, we're very open. We are open to accommodating all. We've had a residents drop in before at the Canning Town Community Centre, which was attended by all 3 local members. We had a couple of visitors, but you know, we're committed to continuously engaging and talking to the local community.
Thank you.
I see Susan and then Carleen, and then I'm going to bring this part of the agenda to a close.
Brilliant. There's just a couple of points I wanted to make. The first one's slightly unfair because we've already found out that you're going to be bringing back a whole strategy for the non-residential elements. But I did wonder on page 109 when you talk about right kind of occupants, what you had in mind. And then my second point is just picking up on a few comments that have been made by my colleagues where there's been much reference to our pleasure at the levels of social housing. And I just think we have to be mindful that while London affordable rent is an improvement on affordable rents and market rents, obviously, it's not social rent. There are no social rent properties in this development, which I think is a real shame, particularly considering the levels of deprivation in Canning Town. But I understand that we're in exceptional circumstances in terms of inflation in construction costs.
London affordable rent is very close to social rent.
Yeah.
Like from a policy point of view, for our intensive purposes, it's not forested affordable, which is 80% of market.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of the reference on page 109 to the right kind of occupiers, that's actually a quotation from the design review panel comments. So not something that I would ask the applicants to comment on.
Okay, when we use that term, then what were we thinking of?
Toby, could you let us know which kind of non-residential unit occupiers the DRP were thinking would be particularly important for the success of the scheme?
I think the uses that are going to activate the frontages rather than sort of cover the frontages with paper. I mean, there's a lot of secret kitchen uses that are going into retail and workspace properties that don't offer anything in terms of activating the street. So I think this is where we would be keen to see the strategy for finding the users that are going to sort of provide interest and activation to those commercial frontages.
Does that mean?
Sorry, that's three.
Sorry. Does that mean, i.e. no chicken shops, no betting shops, unless they've gone through the normal procedures for applications?
Answer.
Fish and chip shops, maybe?
Yeah.
Certainly in terms of betting shops, we won't do that, and our fund won't allow us to do that. In terms of food and beverage, we would want to work in terms of obviously extract to make sure that works. So we do have, for example, there is a pizza outlet at Rathbone Market. We've had no issues there in terms of ventilation. I would say that it's absolutely in my interests to make sure that we get the right sort of active occupiers in there. I've got a lot of homes to get occupied and to get sold, and I want to make sure that we've got a really vibrant community. We've got some really good examples of other things that we've done around the country, particularly in Bristol, where actually we've spoken quite openly to the DRP and to others here that the rents that we're looking for, we're not going to be looking at a market rent. Most of my value is upstairs. If I can get vibrancy and allow people to come in at lower rents on the ground floor, I should be able to get more money upstairs, speaking very openly with you. That's worked brilliantly in places like Bristol, where we've got a scheme called Wapping Wharf. I'd ask you to go and Google that. It's absolutely fantastic. We've got independent coffee people, but we've gone for lower rents. But sort of the trick of the trade there is that we don't give them cash contributions towards fitting out. Don't think that's good business. They have to fit out. They have to put their pound of flesh in themselves, give them rent free. That means that they fail as a business. What we have is the next coffee shop can come in as well. So you keep that hybrid.
I know the scheme, it is very good.
Yeah.
Given our commitment to community wealth building, does that mean that local businesses who might want to sort of use those units would have preferential treatment?
I'd love to have that conversation if you can with the right people. We would definitely want to do that. Clearly, you know, there is a cost to putting them in, and we need to sort of recoup some of that cost. We don't see that as a, as a massive profit driver. We want to get the right use. So be happy to have that conversation.
Perhaps we could take that as another action point to ask Liam if he could kindly link the applicants up with our community wealth building team as well. Carly.
I just had two questions. I can't remember what the other one was, but I'll go with the one I remember. Oh, that was it. Just in regards to objections that came in, and my colleague behind me, Councillor McLean, did mention it, but I didn't hear any answer. There was a couple of objections that came in that were concerned around dust. And I just wondered what mitigating factors you're putting in place in order to deal with the issues of dust. So are you wetting various other things? So that was one. And my other question I wanted to ask, just on the same vein of questioning just a moment ago in regards to that commercial space, I can't remember, and for the life of me, I'm trying to remember the original application. Is there going to be any high quality, good, I'm going to ask for it. If I ask for it, then you can say no or not. But is there going to be any high quality community space? And what I'm thinking about is young people coming into a space where they can be entrepreneurial, they can set up business, small little business type, whether it's coffee shops, whether it's coffee carts, I don't know what that could be, whether it's just a community space that can be vibrant. Is that a consideration? Could that be a consideration? I'm just, going back to some of the comments you made earlier, Rathbone Market is a real shame, considering, and we can argue this all day long, but considering that used to be a vibrant space in Canning Town and brought many people together, it no longer is that space. It's trying, it's not there yet. That space is wasted. There's so many things that could happen in that space, but isn't for whatever reasons, I don't know. And I just wonder, we don't want to fall foul of the same disease over here in this new development. So I just wonder, is there an opportunity? Or even you might say to me, actually, no, Colin, there isn't there. But I tell you what, for the price of two, I'll give it to you over at Rathbone Market, for instance.
There is, there is a conversation to be had around the outstanding unit at Rathbone Market, which Elizabeth has started with local councillors. So that's definitely something in train that we want to have a conversation, because that particular unit has been sat there empty for a while. I would say some of the uses within the square themselves would spend too much time on Rathbone Market, I know, Chair, but we have spent a lot of time and money trying to invigorate that. And again, we're going to have a further conversation about that, but it's genuinely not for lack of trying. I think I welcome the opportunity to be put in contact with the community wealth building team. We can have that conversation. Nothing would make me happier than to get people start up businesses in there. Yes, there'll have to be a rent, but we can have a conversation about the rent, but actually to incubate some people coming through into there. Wapping Wharf has done that successfully in Bristol. Smaller, start-up businesses. I don't need a covenant necessarily to come in there, but if they can pay some rent, get going, then we would like to try and support that.
Yeah, the local member, Councillor Chadar, has already sort of inferred a similar sort of thing that you're talking about. And I met with her on site last week in early conversations, but it's something that we'd really like to actively encourage and make, and we will listen and try and make it work as best as possible. Dust. And on the dust, yes, we are doing regular, we are wheel washing. I mean, it's it's a difficult place because of how open the site is, but the contractor is doing everything in their power to mitigate dust at all times, and is wheel washing regularly. And you know, if there's any specific issues with any local residents, we could always go and do a door knock to them and offer, you know, some conversations as well. But they're absolutely committed.
There's a couple inside the pack.
Yeah, no, I did see, but you know, we can letter drop them as well. Yeah, the contractor is absolutely committed to being responsible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Liam, ask you please to put up the officer recommendation on the screen. Could I also ask, please, could we just have your names for the minute?
Yep, Duncan Cumberland.
And Elizabeth Wright, that's W-R-I-G-H-T.
And we're both from English Cities Fund, so.
Thank you. So the recommendation from officers is we're asked to resolve to agree the reasons for approval set out in this report and delegate authority, etc. Can I ask those members who are in agreement to raise their hands, please? That is unanimous. Thank you. That is approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
That's good.
So we move on next to what would have been the first item on the agenda tonight, which is item 5. Numbers 1 to 11 broadband. We do have Daniel White with us. Did you want to present this item, or did you prefer to answer questions?
I don't know whether it's worth potentially Chloe going first, and then I can kind of respond.
We do normally have the planning officers presentation after
Sure.
applicants.
Sure, I can do my little speech.
Yeah, of course. You can have up to 5 minutes.
So sorry, sir, can you tell us who you are?
Yeah, Daniel White from Parker Planning. I'm the agent for the application. Good evening, all. The proposal seeks to convert the existing building known as Gredley House from existing office space Class E, use Class E, to a hotel use Class C1, which looks to provide 151 hotel rooms, with 16 rooms being accessible rooms. Part of the ground floor will provide ancillary floor space for a reception, a bar and staff area, with a limited number of bedrooms also proposed on the ground floor. The north wing, the existing NatWest Bank located on the ground floor, does not form part of the application and will remain as such. Proposed development, being a change of use, does not seek to enlarge, extend or expand the scale of the existing building, nor increase its footprint or height. The car parking spaces located within the curtilage of the site will be reduced to 15 disabled parking spaces and 2 parking spaces allocated for taxi and private hire pickup and drop-off. 6 parking spaces will be retained by NatWest Bank, and 3 car parking spaces will be allocated to NHS, the Grant House, with delivery and servicing arrangements not altering as a result of the proposal. An extensive green roof is proposed on the pergola, which will be installed over the car parking spaces to the eastern boundary of the site. The proposed carport pergola situated in the existing car park will be 2.3 metres in height, 6.3 metres in depth, and will be constructed of galvanised steel and have a green roof. Extensive green roof is also proposed on the existing substation to the south. It's noted that Gredley House has been marketed extensively by 3 estate agents since 2020 to find appropriate tenants for the office unsuccessfully. It's also noted that within Stratford there are extensive options available for rental of office space. A recent check on Rightmove showed 62 results for office space within the Stratford area alone. As such, there's no reasonable prospect to come to the conclusion that the loss of the office space, someone wanted office space in this location, couldn't find something suitable. And in addition to rental options, there's also various buildings for sale. It's therefore considered that proposing a hotel in this location would be the perfect opportunity for a well-established hotel provider. In terms of the benefits of the proposal, it would bring a largely unoccupied building back into use and provide further employment opportunities during the fit out of the building and the associated works, together with providing longer-term job opportunities with the hotel. Fast and ever improving transport connections into London generate good demand for guests who prefer to avoid high rates and more central London-based hotels, but can easily commute to the city. The demand for the additional overnight accommodation in Stratford will be driven by visitors to the Olympic Park and Westfield Shopping Centre, with over 51 million visitors per year. The proposed hotel is highly sustainable. In a highly sustainable location with a 10-minute walking radius of 2 train stations, including Stratford International. Reaching the site by public transport is just as easy with 2 bus stops within a 5-minute walk from the front of the property. Recent works to the road network surrounding the site have improved the safety for pedestrians by providing better vehicle separation. There are now dedicated cycle lanes running along the sections of the Grove and Broadway, which will allow potential visitors and staff of the hotel to reach the hotel by bicycle cycle stands provided within the site for short stay and longer stay cycle parking. New hard surfacing will be installed to replace the car park area, and permeable paving introduced into the car park with a small area of arboretum. This will ensure minimal disturbance to the existing tree root blades and allow air and water to permeate through the arboretum, ensuring the long-term health of the existing mature trees on the site. Loose gravel has been chosen as it will encircle the tree trunks to ensure no strangulation and allowing plenty of room for the future growth of the trees.
I have 1 minute left.
Okay, I'll try very quickly. The UF target of 3 has been met utilising the green route, the pergola rain gardens, etc., etc. The acoustic design and the travel acoustic criteria has been submitted to the proposal and looks to alleviate any neighbouring concerns that have been raised. The overall layout of the proposal has been carefully considered and designed to provide an economically and structurally viable scheme which adds to the St John's conservation area. The elevation design will remain as it is and should it be required to change in the future to accommodate signage, the appropriate planning application will be made. It's therefore considered that the application should be approved today. Thanks.
Thank you. Could we now move to the officer presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can I confirm everyone can see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thanks. Item 5 relates to the application site at 1 to 11 Broadway at Stratford. The application site is located on the southeastern side of Broadway, with the western boundary of the site being bound by Chant Street. The site is designated in the local plan as part of a strategic site and employment hub and part of the Stratford Metropolitan Town Centre. The site is highly accessible and is situated within an area identified with a public transport accessibility level of 6B, which is the highest rating. The site comprises a red brick and stone clad building, 5 stories in height, which consists of NatWest Bank on the ground floor, accessed via a separate entrance, and office space on upper floors and part of the ground floor. The existing NatWest Bank does not form part of the application. The site is located adjacent to the Black Bull Public House and Granta House. Only the front elevation of the building is situated within the Stratford St John's Conservation Area. The application site is not listed. Pedestrian access to the site is primarily taken from Broadway. Vehicle access is taken via a gate located on Chant Street. The existing rear car park runs along the southeastern and eastern boundaries, providing 37 car parking spaces. The proposal seeks to convert the existing office space to a hotel, which will provide 151 hotel rooms. Part of the ground floor will provide ancillary floor space for a reception, bar, and staff area. The presentation today will focus on 7 main aspects: the principle of development, design, landscape, impact upon amenity, sustainable transport, inclusive access, and security and safety. Other issues not listed are covered in the committee report. In terms of the principle of development, the proposed change of use would result in the loss of commercial, business, and service space. Policy E1 of the London Plan states that change of use of surplus office space to other uses is supported. Evidence to demonstrate surplus office space should include evidence of vacancy and marketing for at least 12 months. The application is accompanied with marketing evidence of the property. The image on the left shows a copy of a brochure produced by JLL. Real estate agents marketed the property over the last 2 years. The submitted statement outlines that 62 results appear on an online real estate property portal for the rental of office space within the Stratford area. Whilst it is recognized that the proposal would result in the loss of potentially high-density employment floor space, the office floor space remained vacant since April 2019. At present, the site provides no benefit to the local economy or community, representing an underutilized floor space in the Stratford Metropolitan Town Centre. The image on the left shows an office to lease advertisement by Glennie on Rightmove, and the image on the right shows the rental signs placed on the exterior of the building from Google Street View since April 2019. For the proposed hotel use, Local Plan Policy J1 supports the provision of quality hotel within town centre locations, proportionate to the function and character of that town centre. The broader employment focus is linked to the visitor economy, as per the employment hub allocation. The proposed development will provide 10 full-time jobs. It is acknowledged that the proposed hotel use provides a lower level of direct employment opportunity than offices. However, offices consider that the proposed use would support the wider economy of the Stratford Metropolitan Town Centre, where both domestic and international tourism are significant contributors to the local economy. In addition, policy E10 of the London Plan encouraged hotels outside of central London to help spread the benefits of tourism to the whole of the capital. As such, officers conclude that the proposal is acceptable in land use terms and would generally be a positive development, which would bring forward a site which has remained vacant for a significant period of time, thereby contributing to the local economy and improving the visitor infrastructure in the borough and the wider area. In terms of design, the proposed development, being a change of use, does not seek to enlarge the scale of the existing building. A green roof is proposed on a pergola, which will be constructed over the car parking space to the eastern boundary of the site. LBN Design and Conservation Officers reviewed the submission and raised no objection. The proposal is therefore considered to be acceptable in design terms. In terms of landscape, as part of the proposed arboricultural works, one Category C tree located adjacent to the front entrance will be removed to facilitate construction access. 3 new trees will be replaced at key locations, and details will be secured by a landscaping condition. The urban greening factor target of 0.3 has been met, utilizing a green roof on the pergola, rain gardens, perennial rich planting and living green walls, as well as additional trees and permeable paving. Subject to conditions, the proposal is considered to provide an improved landscape on site. In terms of impact upon amenity, as no external alterations are proposed to the existing building, there will be no loss of outlook or natural light to nearby residents. A representation has been received from the leaseholder of 25 to 27 Broadway. Concerns raised relate to potential noise complaints from hotel guests, which would affect the existing restaurant and bar. LBN environmental health officers confirmed that the complaints are unlikely to be considered as a statutory nuisance, as any individual guest would only be affected for the length of their stay. The leaseholder confirmed by email on the 12th of July that their concerns have been alleviated. On the basis of LBN environmental health officers' technical review of the proposal, officers are satisfied that, subject to a fixed plant machinery condition, the proposal is acceptable in regards to the impact upon amenity. In terms of transportation, policy T6.4 of the London Plan sets out that in locations of PTELs 4 to 6, any on-site provision for hotel parking should be limited to operational needs, disabled persons parking, and parking required for taxis, coaches, and deliveries or servicing. Existing site benefits from 37 car parking spaces with no disabled parking space. The car parking provision has been reduced to 15 blue badge parking spaces and 2 parking spaces allocated for taxi and private hire pickup and drop off. Staff and visitors will be prevented from applying for parking permits as part of the S106 agreement. The reduction in car parking provision is supported. A total of 9 other parking spaces will be allocated to adjacent properties. 6 parking spaces will be retained to NatWest Bank, and 3 parking spaces will be allocated to NHS, occupants of Granta House. Transport for London officers reviewed the proposed revised car parking layout and accepted that the proposal is a conversion of an existing office building, which shares the car park with other users. According to the revised car parking layout, the hotel will only have access to the blue badge and operational parking spaces. This is deemed acceptable by TfL, subject to a parking design and management plan condition to control allocation. The proposed development will provide 8 long stay and 4 short stay cycle parking at ground floor level, in accordance to standards set out in the London Plan. No details were submitted on security and accessibility aspects. A condition for full details of cycle parking provision is recommended. LBN transportation officers considered that the proposals are appropriate, subject to a S106 obligation and conditions. In summarizing the matters considered, officers conclude that through the imposition of appropriate planning conditions and planning obligations, the proposal is supported with regards to transport. In terms of inclusive access, a total of 3 lifts will provide level access to all floors within the building. The proposal will feature 151 rooms, of which 10% will be wheelchair accessible. Subject to condition on accessible rooms, the proposal is considered to be acceptable. Finally, for security and safety aspects, following a meeting in March, Metropolitan Police recommended a secure by design condition. The application is accompanied with a fire safety statement. An evacuation strategy has been incorporated to ensure the safety of future occupants. Subject to conditions, officers considered that appropriate measures are incorporated and provided for the proposal to minimize incidents of crime and fire safety. This slide summarizes the recommended head of terms, which includes reduced car development agreement, 15 disabled car parking spaces, employment and skills contribution, carbon offset contribution, travel plan, and section 2788 works. The Strategic Development Committee is asked to note the update report and resolve to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the committee report and delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to the completion of a legal agreement under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 as amended based on the head of terms identified at Appendix 2 of the report and the conditions listed in Appendix 1 of the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee members. Everyone, can I start with you, Carleen, and then we'll move around anti-clockwise.
I just had a quick question. I was going to ask more, but I'll let my colleagues. Just want to understand the car parking, and you're all literally drop off your chairs, and also the cycle parking. 8 long stay car cycle parking and 4 short stay. It didn't to me scream out sustainable transport. It didn't scream out to me that we're encouraging staff working in the space to cycle to work. And I just wondered why it was such a low number. I do appreciate that if they're visitors, they may not come on bike. But I just, we can't just assume. And the other thing I wanted to ask, just for clarification from the officer. So the application for 15 disabled spaces, which I'm assuming that's 15 overall outside, there will be none of those 37, apart from 6 retained by NatWest Bank and 3 retained by NHS, Grata House? Yeah. And I just want to understand, because NatWest Bank is no longer, I just didn't understand. It just sounded to me like it was a secret something going on somewhere else. Does that make sense?
It does. Could I maybe bring in somebody to address the question about NatWest Bank and then also about the amount of cycle parking?
So NatWest Bank doesn't form part of the application. So NatWest Bank will stay on the ground floor. That will be shared with the hotel, like reception space and the bar, ancillary bar and staff area. So those, like the agent might be able to clarify if like the existing, like from what I understand from the agent, the car parking spaces secured for NatWest Bank is included on their lease in the property. So that's why it's being retained on site. But for the proposed hotel use, it will strictly be restricted to 15 Blue Badge parking spaces and operational parking for private hire or taxi drop-off. And that's compliant with London Plan policies. And the full details of cycle parking condition would allow the applicant to offer more or better cycle accommodation at AOD stage. Also, the travel plan condition 13 will require the applicant to submit details on the baseline travel patterns and mode share for the site and targets for the use of sustainable travel modes and reduced reliance on private cars in a 5-year period. So the heads of terms includes the travel plan monitoring fee, and we'll see how they target towards a more sustainable mode of transport in 5 years.
So it sounds like the ground floor, which is currently NatWest Bank, is not part of this application and it's leased separately, and that the car parking space is allocated to that part of the building, that part of the building's lease. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
In terms of the amount of cycle parking, I think my colleague is right that that's quite a small number and not necessarily a number that suggests that you're expecting all the staff to cycle to work. Is that something you've given some thought to?
We have considered that when we were designing the application, and it is a very, very sustainable location. What with the use of e-cycles and the e-scooters and things like that, and people's existing cycling habits and things, we kind of anticipated that the majority of people will likely arrive by train or other modes of transport rather than cycle storage. But obviously we can look to review that if that is a concern for the committee.
Yes.
Look to improve upon that.
I think you've already heard us talking about cycle parking in the previous application. I could bore for Britain about it, but you know, there is a general kind of if you build it, they will come approach to cycle infrastructure. And obviously you've literally got the segregated cycleways outside leading almost to the door. So it seems a shame to not further cement that impression by providing really good, secure cycle parking that might encourage people who are thinking about biking to work about perhaps giving it a try.
Can I respond to that? Very quickly?
Yes.
There is also the condition that looks to secure that as well. So there won't be, you know, if officers don't feel comfortable with the level of cycle parking on the side, and that's within their gift.
Do you want to
address that?
come back, Carly?
If you don't mind, so just let me think of what I'm trying to say in order. So just in regards to that ground floor space that is leasable.
Yeah, it's currently NatWest and those.
Own it.
Yeah, and they lease it from my client. And those associated parking spaces are with that.
If that's.
Yeah, and that's how it will remain.
I just want to understand something. Because let's just say another bank went back into that space. It doesn't seem to me to be a space that's made for that type of building. Having a bank right adjacent to within the same footprint as a hotel where you've got sleeping rooms. I just want to understand the ramifications of that, because one of the things I checked on your application is where your fire escapes are and your staircases, and there would seem to be a staircase that runs, I assume it's not into, but down where the ground floor is, access from your top floors. So I just want to understand how that works, because it looks to me that those, and maybe I'm wrong, it looks to me that those spaces within the proposed ground floor are all part of what looks like the hotel. So I just want you to tell me what it is that I'm looking at in comparison to what it is that you're proposing, because it would sound that you want to lease out that part of the building, retain some of those features. I just want to understand how that works with the space that you're proposing, which is a hotel.
So
makes sense?
Yeah, no, that does make sense. So now
I'm looking on 77.
Yeah. So NatWest has obviously been there for a number of years, and I think my client is keen to look to retain that use within the building. In terms of the escape route that you mentioned, that does fall within our red line site for the hotel, and that will obviously clearly separate NatWest, or not currently NatWest,
yeah,
but another part of the building. So there is that clear separation between the uses, so there's no potential conflict.
Yeah.
With regards to the use and potential sleeping arrangements of the hotel, the bank's not going to be open until silly o'clock in the morning or anything like that. So I don't think there'll be any sort of conflict in terms of, you know, people complaining from either party.
But there will be conflict in regards to millions of pounds of money in a bank, if they still have money in banks, in that space, which looks very accessible to those bedrooms and that hotel space. So I just want to understand, are you reinforcing walls? Does that mean that the boundary will change? There won't be those doors going into and onto?
So the uses will be completely separate.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go around anti-clockwise in the order you put your hands up. So
thank you. I've got a question that builds on Carlene's question about parking. I was slightly surprised that you got 16 rooms that can be used by disabled people, but only 15 blue badge parking spaces. What about the person who's in the 16th room? Are we just hoping that they will also not need blue badge parking?
No, not at all. We do have the enlarged spaces that would accommodate that as well. So they're in addition to the 15 disabled badges spaces.
Okay, so there will be
up to 18 potential blue badge spaces, but 15 are, you know, allocated for disabled, and then you've got additional 3 enlarged spaces.
Okay, a much bigger question than that I've got is, when I've been on planning committees that have considered hotel bids before, we've had a real idea of what that hotel is going to look like and who's going to be coming to the hotel. And here I've got no idea whether we're looking at something that's trying to be a boutique, you know, Four Seasons-y type hotel, or given the amount of pressure on housing at the moment, whether this is going to be housing our homeless people, in which case you've then got questions about how this allies to social care and whether you've spoken to our social care teams. So I'm just wondering whether there's a tenant in mind, and in terms of the whole kind of hotel we're creating here, who it's going to be catering to. And if it is catering to the tourist trade who are coming in, then, and I know we favour sustainable transport where practical, but if you've got people coming from far outside London, I can see a definite demand for people to be able to bring their cars, because unfortunately they're probably not returning to areas that have got the transport connections of a Stratford. You know, it might be somewhere quite rural. So I'd just like to get a better idea of who this hotel's being pitched at.
I can confirm that, you know, if the application was approved today, that Travelodge would be looking to take on the hotel. So that will hopefully clarify that element.
Not really, because I think we're all very, very aware that a lot of our travel lodges locally are being used to house people who unfortunately are facing homelessness in the borough. So is that what we're being told?
So not at all. You know, Travelodge will use the hotel how they see fit, and if there is a need for housing homeless people within it, then you know that will be something that will be discussed with them and the council. I assume is something that is out of my client's control, and it's certainly something that you know Travelodge can discuss with the council when appropriate, if it's needed. In terms of your demand for cars, obviously this is intended to be a car-free zone, with the exception of the disabled spaces and the enlarged spaces with the taxi drop-off area within the site. You know, we can't control people using cars that are coming from further afield. It's impossible. You know, that it's more than likely that the majority of guests would come, you know, either by sustainable modes of transport and would not, because of its location, decide to use the car. But if they did, there is a car park, you know, within the shopping centre itself that they can park in if they need to. But the idea is, you know, and what we work really hard with TfL to do and achieve is ultimately have as car-free zone as possible, with the exception of the disabled spaces.
Madeline.
Okay, my concerns, first of all, are about the disabled rooms. Okay, looking at the plan, I had presumed that the pink rooms on the plan on page 77 and the floors above would be the disabled spaces, because the ones that were indicated on the plan that we saw on the screen showed that the rooms that were designated as disabled rooms were basically the same size as the ones that, as the other ones. I think we've got a couple, yeah, there's only a couple possibly indicated on page 77. My concern is that many hotels, including many in Westford, even the posher ones, think that a disabled room is simply a room that allows a wheelchair to get around, and yet there are no fittings or fixtures within either the bathrooms or next to the bed to allow easy movement for the person by themselves, or even with a one partner, to get in and out of the washing facilities such as the shower, or to get in and out of bed. My brother's got MS. He was over recently from the States and was having a terrible time in one of the posh hotels in Westfield. So it's something that's particularly concerned me, because it was taking one of his grown-up nephews of about your stature, who was going to have to, who had to go to the room every morning and evening and lift him in and out of bed. Now, considering what they were paying, which I think will probably be more than a Travelodge, and probably more than the Travelodge that normally invest in such features, can we have some kind of assurance that there will be appropriate facilities for these rooms to actually be called disabled specific.
Yeah. I know within the Travelodge specification, how they design their hotels, that they are designed specifically, the disabled rooms, fixtures and fittings for disabled people in mind. So it's not just a case that they can go in and, you know, turn around in a wheelchair. That's not it. They will go way beyond that. I couldn't tell you the specifics right now, but it's something that I can go away and certainly look to discuss with Travelodge to ensure that, you know, from your own personal experience, those, you know, difficulties aren't found here.
Perhaps ask you to supply comments.
In terms of the kind of layout of the disabled rooms.
And the specifications.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fixtures and fittings. Can I just ask Officer who's applied, not particularly to this application, but do we have particular guidance for the level of fixtures and fittings that should be in public spaces or in public use rooms like a hotel for people that are disabled beyond ramps and turning space?
Yeah, I just want to clarify that on the committee update, the floor plans have been updated, where the green areas shaded are the accessible bedrooms, and condition 14 requires the applicant to submit 1 to 50 plans showing the detailed layout of at least 16 wheelchair accessible rooms in accordance with the British standard. That's the guidance that's stated on the London plan. In terms of areas outside of the hotel, that's something that maybe I can bring it back to the policy team.
Perhaps it would be helpful for you to take it away and to update us separately, perhaps at the next Development Control Members Forum, because I think it's a really good point raised by Councillor Simonton, and one we haven't really discussed before, certainly not in a meeting I've been in, about what our actual policy requirements are in order for a room to be designated as disabled accessible. So I think a short, if it's possible, a short briefing on that element of our current planning policy would be really helpful, please.
Thank you for that, Chair. May I ask one short further question? I'm concerned, considering that we've been told that this is going to be possibly lent out to one of the major chains like Travelodge, and that considering how much actual public space is within the hotel, it concerns me that there's only, 20 seats in the cafe bar for people to grab a meal in the morning. If it is being rented out to school groups from overseas, or some kind of city break package tours, etc., there's simply not enough space for anybody to have breakfast, and that does concern me with regards to what Travelodge or any other user of this space will actually use the facilities for. It does make me worried about whether their aim is for it to be built for homeless people. Not that we don't want to house homeless people, but we want to make sure that they have sufficient public spaces.
To clarify that, the idea with that space is for it to be predominantly a bar area, not a restaurant, where people will sit down and eat food. So they'll have, the normal sort of bar snacks that you would associate with a bar. So it's more of it's not a sit down, have your breakfast sort of area, but obviously, 20 seats for 150 rooms does seem rather low. So it's something that we can go away and look to maybe increase the numbers, so people can grab a coffee if they want, or whatever else. And like you say, if there are overseas schools that come and decide to stay at the hotel, then most classes have at least 30 kids in, don't they? So
plus staff.
Yeah,
particularly for overseas trips. My concern, I am then concerned that this appears to be B rather than B&B.
Sorry?
Bed rather than bed and breakfast, i.e. there is for a short stay accommodation rather than a hotel.
I can clarify, it is definitely going to be a hotel. You don't have to have a restaurant for it to be a hotel. It's got bar facilities, but it's never our intention to provide a restaurant in this location. It's just not really practical. This side of station, if it was larger, then I'm sure it's something that Travelodge would have considered.
I don't think we're looking for blue. full French dining experience in the heart of Stratford necessarily, but I think it would be more feasible as a hotel if there was at least a place for people to have breakfast.
Charlene.
Brilliant, thank you, Chair. Just a few questions for me. So the ground floor of the other part of the site is not part of this planet, but that we're starting to
Speak up a bit, Charlene, so we can just pick you up on the microphone.
Are leaving, so yeah, I'm sure that at some point we might see another, the other part of the site. My question was just about the parking on the site. So I was looking at the diagram on page 77, and obviously there is an entrance from the main road next to where that is, and the operational parking spaces are round back. My concern is that it could get quite congested along Chance Street with taxis not necessarily going into the car park to drop off people. I mean, there's 151 rooms, 2 spaces, and it could be quite congested. And also about the servicing of arrangements for the building. So it's mentioned that delivery and servicing arrangements will not be altered, but it was an office block. So I assume that they wouldn't have had as many larger deliveries, etc., as a hotel would have and as regular. Another point is with regards to the adjacent properties. So I'm worried about overlooking on, I'd like to know what sort of landscaping will be, trees, etc., between the building and the properties on Chance Square. Because it's one thing it being an office block and it being occupied during working hours, but it's going to be a hotel, and I'm sure that they'll be overlooking people's bedrooms. So yeah, I'd like to have some information about that. And also, soundproofing, I know that it's mentioned that, it's going to be to Travelodge's sort of regulations, but again, it was an office block and it's going to be a hotel. And my last point was just, I mentioned with the servicing, because obviously it's quite a tight area. And so, yeah, I'd just like to have an understanding about what consideration is being taken with regards to the lorries, etc. Thank you.
With regards to the operational parking, obviously we've looked to provide that within the site as it's a requirement. There is obviously, I appreciate your concern, taxis might not always use those areas within the secure car park. But there is also a drop-off area less than maybe 20 metres from the front of the building that there's a good chance that in reality taxis may use that to also drop off people. And that's an existing, area where existing businesses use. In terms of your kind of concerns with regards to it being quite congested and the deliveries and things like that, we have actually had it tracked specifically to ensure that there isn't any potential conflict with cars that are within the car park, so that vehicles can leave, and I'm talking about the larger vehicles, can leave safely in a forward motion. There's enough room for them to turn around. I appreciate, it was an office block, but I've been assured by my client that there was a hell of a lot of deliveries, from the office workers when it was fully occupied that were appreciated. It was, smaller vans and things like that, the typical Amazon sort of stuff size. But there'll be less frequent deliveries with this use. So hopefully that will, look to reduce the number of vehicles going up and down Chance Street. The congestion within the car park will be limited. In terms of overlooking, it's nobody's interest to obviously have guests at the hotel overlooking anybody's gardens. The landscaping is along that boundary. I know exactly what you're talking about in terms of the houses that are literally the other side of the wall. The existing trees are going to remain and are going to thrive as a result of this hotel, because the current horrible hard standing that's actually in the car park is proposed to be ripped up, and permeable paving and appropriate tree guards and things like that are going to be there. So they are going to be secured and, you know, allowed to grow even more. So there will be that natural green buffer that will only enhance as a result of the hotel there. But I do appreciate your concerns with regards to overlooking, and I'm sure that within, again, the travel specification, we'll have, you know, blinds or screened, obscured glazing, so that it is difficult to see out because of that, you know, it is not that far from the existing boundaries along there. But you know, you're not talking about 3 metre high trees. They're well established, been there for 20+ years. So they do provide quite a large natural buffer already, and they'll only get larger and obviously managed appropriately. Is there anything else? Sorry.
Yeah, no, just on the trees. Do you know how many trees there are there?
Off the top of my head, I don't, but it is all in the landscaping report that's quite extensive, and you know, that proposes the management of that whole treed area and to the front as well. So we have actually provided a lot of detail and consideration in terms of the landscaping with the green roofs and everything else for the application. So a lot of thought has gone into that.
Okay, and just one last question if I may. So the bin store for the hotel is again sort of backs onto the gardens, which are, they're not large gardens, it's Stratford, to the residential properties. And say, you know, I would like consideration to be taken as to when the bins are emptied and also being chucked in the bins, because it can be quite noisy, you know, and disturb the residents. I don't know if there's another place on the site. Because obviously it's nice for the hotel for it to be out of the way, but you know, it would potentially you know, interfere with existing residents. Yeah, and I think that's about it.
We have looked to use the existing bin store. I note your point with regards to potential noise and things like that, and we will be looking to use a private bin collection company. So that's something that's within the control of Travelodge. Obviously, they won't be doing it at 11 o'clock at night or anything like that. So consideration will be given for the residential properties to make sure that is, you know, done at a reasonable hour and as limited as possible. So that it looks to not impact the existing residents there.
And also the depositing of the rubbish in the
Yeah, both.
I wonder whether the management of the bins such that it doesn't interfere too much with the existing residents already is something that we might be able to pick up with a condition. Could officers advise?
Yeah, so condition 6 relates to refuse storage and collection. That requires full details of the storage and collection of refuse and recyclables. That will be we'll have our LBN waste officers being consulted on this.
Right.
So yeah, we can tweak the wording and just to like ensure that the neighboring properties will not be affected.
I think that would be helpful, thank you, because Charlene's quite right. It's not just about the times at which the bins are collected, the times at which some poor employees staggering out with loads of glass and smashing it in in a way that's going to really disturb people. I'm going to take the last couple of comments. If I could go Carleen first and then Madeline.
Thank you, Chair. I did just want to pick up the bin issue. So is there an opportunity to maybe think about relocating the bins? The only reason why I ask is they are on the back of people's properties, and this is not residential waste, it will be commercial waste, which is completely different. So if there isn't, then can due consideration be given to how you screen that area so it doesn't smell? And how you, as the Chair did say, how you mitigate noise from rightfully bins being emptied at whatever time. I had a question also in regards to deliveries. So in a hotel, you would expect to see larger vehicles collecting linen. When would that be happening? Is there a condition that says that has to happen between reasonable hours rather than late at night? And I had one other question in regards to, forgot what it was now. In regards to, can't remember, don't worry. wasn't important.
Screening and also any possible smell from the bins and the larger vehicles for linen first. And if your third question comes back to you, then we can return to you, colleague.
I think in terms of relocating the bins, I think we, in designing, redesigning the car park, it has been considered. I appreciate your points with regards to additional screening could be included, and I think my client would be more than happy to look to do that as part of the application. To also look to address the potential smell issue, and that again would be something that would be within Travel Lodge's control. But we can do things within the kind of design of it, and like Chloe said, there is a condition there that looks to secure details of that within the application. I hope that answers your question with regards to the bins. The deliveries in terms of the vehicles, sure that's something that they could look to control in terms of delivery times, so that it doesn't impact the residential existing properties, basically. So similarly with the bin collection and things like that. Yeah, it's in no one's best interest to have lorries turn up at 11 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock in the morning.
I'd hope not. I do remember my last question was. Yeah, and maybe this is for you more than anybody else, because I know that you're quite exercised in this point. I'm confused why design and review panel haven't been part of this application. I appreciate it's not a residential application, but it still is 151 rooms in a hotel. And I just wondered why the applicants hadn't engaged the design and review panel in regards to what this would look like. I appreciate you may not be changing the outside, the exterior of the building, but you will be moving it from office space into sleeping space. So I just wondered why the applicants hadn't.
For that very reason, because it is a change of use. It would be very different if it was a new build hotel, and of course we'd look to engage with the design review panel, but it is a change of use. We're not looking to change the exterior of the building, and it's only the internal uses that we look to change within the building. I know that we have been liaising and working very hard with the council to ensure that it's a design layout that is of an appropriate standard, and one that the planning officer is happy with. And this has been, we've been in communication probably for the past 6 months at least, to try and ensure that we've made every effort to address any concerns raised by the planning officers.
Yeah, thank you.
Madeleine, and then I can also see Charlene popping in, and then I'm going to wrap this part up as well.
I know that one of the concerns from local businesses was from the pub with regards to concerns regarding complaints about noise, as the property would be used into the evening at the same time that the pub may be a bit jolly. And I'm pleased to see that because of the way the bank is placed, and also where you've got your communal areas that on the ground floor, they're the closest to the pub. How are you going to ensure that the rooms that face towards the pub, which is 1, 2, 3, quite a number on each floor, how are they protected more than the rooms on the other sides against noise?
In terms of that, we have looked into the noise situation, which is a very valid point. And the specification of the glazing on those elevations specifically is going to be more enhanced, so that it does ensure that it works both ways. The hotel inhabitants don't get disturbed by the noise, and vice versa.
Charlene.
Let's stick on the deliveries again. I know that obviously, I just wanted to put on record about the fact that I know I was talking about Transport being really congested, but just to remember that there's actually a stall up there, and so many times I've seen big lorries swinging around, thinking, oh gosh, look, there's loads of kids who didn't really expect it. So I hope that will be taken into consideration when the delivery and servicing plan. Obviously, I know officers will take it, but just wanted to flag that.
James also pointed out that condition 12 also covers deliveries, so I'm sure that's something we can rely on.
Yeah, that's
to take it away.
And maybe I'm not sure exactly what distance from the property is taken into consideration, because the schools are a bit further afield, but they should be factored into it. And my last point was just about the water network infrastructure, which I just thought to myself, actually, you know, it was an office block, so they'll be making cups of tea and things like that, not 151 people having showers at the same time. So, you know, it's really, really important. We have had issues with water extraction in the past, with not exposures to the park. So yeah, it's just really important that that is on point. But I know officers will be on it.
And is that an assessment that you've made as well as part of the change of use?
It is, and it is one that's reflected in the design of certainly the car park and everything else to not necessarily accommodate the direct use of the hotel, but we've also looked at the increase of water from the hotel and how that's dispersed into the existing water network as part of the application.
Thank you. Could I ask please for the officer recommendation to be shared back on screen?
Yeah.
Thank you, members. We're asked to note the update report and resolve to agree reasons for approval and delegate authority, etc., as set out on the screen. Can I ask those in agreement to please raise their hands? That's also unanimous and that is approved. Thank you very much. That draws to a close the business for tonight. Our next meeting is on the 19th of September. So in the meantime, thank you for coming. Thank you to anyone for watching, and have a lovely summer.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.